Am I on? Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. How are you doing? Welcome to Living Critically. I have Chris Shelton on again tonight. Hi, Chris. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
So you've been on the channel enough. We don't really probably have to go into who you are and what you do, but he's, ex-Scientology author, advocate against cult behavior. But before we do that, I just want to send love to GE and Casey. So
yes.
I don't want to make the thing, but they're both sick, and I care about them very much. You see my GE sticker up there. We love you guys. Please get better, and we hope to see you very, very soon. So anyway, moving on. Tonight we're talking about your book, Scientology, which is actually wrong, apparently, because it's not Xenu, it's Xemu.
Yeah, that's right.
Why they just read it wrong and kept it that way? I don't know.
Well, both are actually right. It is one of the stupidest arguments to be possibly to have in the ex-Scientology world is Xenu versus Xemu, but it's
because he writes about it. He writes Xemu in the OT3 his writings, but then later on he uses Xenu. So I don't know. We'll get to that. But starting off, what I like that your book has a lot in it. There is a fuck ton to unpack. It's possible we don't get through everything in one show, so sorry if we don't. But one of the things, like, my son and I were actually reading the book together for a little bit, and we were talking about it, and he was like, well, I understand why he hates Scientology. I was like, why is that? It's like, because they fucked up his love life. I like the personal touches to it, because it really kind of like grounds what you're trying to put across and say, this is bad, and see, I experienced this, and this is why. Mm-hmm. So tell us why you decided to write the book to begin with.
Sure. I wanted a way to get something out there that would be factual, that would be complete, that would give you the whole story, not just half the story. And I didn't want to write a memoir, because everybody writes a memoir. Everybody writes, this happened to me, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And that is a moment, that is a collection of moments in time which have happened and are, happened to that person in that place and time, and can therefore be written off more easily by people who go, oh, that was just that guy. That was just that bad experience. He's just got, an axe to grind. See, in that part there, he should have done this and it all would have worked out differently, right?
Yeah.
So people in other words, people get really judgy about that stuff. So I thought, I don't want that. What I want instead is I want to put something out there that is inarguable, that is factual, that is like, here are the facts. Here is what this subject actually is. Here's what it pretends to be. Here's what it really is. And from the viewpoint of somebody who truly, truly believed it, understands exactly how it's put together, and then managed to wake up enough to get the hell out of it, fully get out of it, and then be able to sit down and write about it. And I don't claim that I'm objective at all. I'm the very not of objective, but that it doesn't mean I can't write factual information. And that's what the book is. It's, kind of critical takedown of Scientology.
Yeah, because although, you have your personal story at the very beginning, then you started talking about the biggest bulk of the book is, this is what happened, this is how it started, this is what it is, this is why it's fucked up.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the course of the book, after starting off with your journey into and in Scientology, because you weren't born into it, but you were raised in it, because your parents found it not long after you were born, actually.
Right.
They were divorced already when they found it, or were divorcing?
Yeah, no, had divorced. We're separated. We were living apart. There was shared custody. All my living memories have Scientology in them. So as far as I'm concerned, I was born in it. But you're right. I wasn't. It was when I was 2 years old that my father first started getting involved in it.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, the way that I read it, you were the kind of the one in the family that got the most into it. Am I wrong there?
No, I did. I went all in. Yeah, I was. I really embarrassing, but yes, I did do that.
No. I mean, you knew nothing else. I think it's because, I mean, your parents found it as adults. You were raised on it. It's the way it's a real form of indoctrination when you were kind of born into something, or it is put into your head when you were that young. I get
Right.
that. That's why there's so many religious people in the world, pretty much, because it's passed on from generation to generation. You can't break that cycle. You're not going to have someone that's 25 years old that has never heard about God or anything like that have that concept introduced to them, and then they say, oh yeah, that makes total sense. No, because they've had a lifetime of learning and education and realize it's fucking bullshit. So it's different when you're kind of raised into it. But you became part of the Sea Org, if you want to talk about that for a minute.
Oh God,
so,
yeah.
The
Sea Org. So okay, so if you were raised a Catholic and you went to church, on a regular basis, you believed it, you thought, yeah, the Pope knows what he's talking about and all that. And then you entered the ministry, right? If that's what they call it there, or, you were called or whatever.
The priesthood.
Yeah, you became a Catholic, a bishop or something, or, a priest. That was kind of like my experience in Santa Barbara when I started working for the church initially, and I did that for 8 years. Excuse me. Then I joined the Sea Org, and that's like going and moving to the Vatican and working there. Now I didn't work in the Vatican. It's just an analogy, but
no, I know.
But for the purposes of trying to make a comparison of what the Sea Organization is, it's like the Vatican of the Catholic Church. It's where the central management happens. It's where all the important decisions are made. It's where all the money goes. Ultimately, it is where the supreme commander of the religion, David Miscavige, is. He is the head of the... Is that
because I know that Hubbard originally started the Church of Scientology. He had a couple different ones, but he considered the one that was the Church of Scientology of California to be the actual Church of Scientology. Is that why the main center is in Santa Barbara?
Oh no, no. Let's clarify some things. So
did I just fuck up?
No. You asked a great question that requires a kind of a minutiae understanding of Scientology's organization, because it's a little weird, and it's changed over the years. And what you're referring to is actually an earlier version of how Scientology was organized. And the main mother church was the Incorporated Church of Scientology of California. And for many, many years, that was where all the money was, and that was where the mainline church organization was. And he set all that stuff up early on. But then in 1967, he started the Sea Organization and went out on boats, and they were, sailing around in international waters. And it was no longer an American-based religion. It was kind of wherever Hubbard's body was, and that was in the Mediterranean or, off the coast of Spain or something. So that's when they maintained Church of Scientology of California in name. But after things went really bad with the FBI raid, they were raided by the FBI in 1977.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. And then there were lawsuits that happened through the 80s, and those lawsuits were directed right at the Church of Scientology of California, because they were, disgruntled former members who were like, hey, you did me wrong, I want some money. And one of those lawsuits was even won, but in the process, the church dissolved the Church of Scientology of California to get rid of all the assets that were being sued for and send them somewhere else. And I don't know how they pulled off those shenanigans, but they did. And
really expensive lawyers.
Yes, very. The top of the line on this one.
Yeah.
And in the 1980s, they completely reorganized and set up a whole different corporate structure. So that's why I had to go on that whole tear to explain that.
Oh, I get it. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
So if you want to continue with the Sea Org. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no. So Sea Org. So yeah, like the Vatican. Yeah, central management. All the dissemination, promotional, marketing materials of Scientology are basically produced by the Sea Organization. All the magazines and handouts and all that crap. All the books that it's all in-house publishing. They have their own facilities that they run now. I worked there for a while. I made books. So they also do all the lectures on little CDs, and they have that all done in-house now. They produce uniforms for the staff. I mean, everything and anything you can imagine needs to be done for a movement like this. They do it. And I worked there for 17 years. I was part of that.
And the working conditions themselves.
Yeah, they sucked.
How many hours a week did you work, and how much did you get paid?
It was like 80 to 96 hours or something. It was pretty crazy. What you would do basically is working in the Sea Org is a full-time, 24/7 dedicated, lifelong commitment. It's not a job. It's not a 9 to 5. It's not something you do and then you go home at night and you have your non-Sea Org spouse and kids or something. That just none of that. It's you live on a base. You wear a uniform. It's a naval tradition, sort of paramilitary group. So you have rank.
So fucking weird. I'm sorry.
No, I know. I get it. It's like Salvation Army, except the Salvation Army actually believes that they're saving the world, right? It's like kind of ranks and ratings, and you refer to one another this way, and it's all, like I said, kind of naval, and because Hubbard was in the Navy and he admired the way the Navy did things, and
no. Hubbard had a fucking Navy fetish. I'm sorry. It went way beyond. I was like, my father was in the Navy. He's not making like little boys put on Navy uniforms and work for him. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, what I can say about that is that Hubbard was in the Navy and he really liked it. And he was also, I will say this for the man, he truly, truly loved the ocean. And he was a good sailor. There was a lot of things that this guy was horrifically bad at. And sailing wasn't like he was like this, amazing sailor, but he was licensed and classed, and he did love the ocean. And it was basically on that tradition that he started the Sea Organization. So,
okay, I'll take it. But you have to sign this contract for how fucking long?
Yeah, for 1 billion years. That's right. 1 billion years.
But that actually works considering like some of the beliefs of, what Hubbard had put forth, the Thetans and all this shit, which we'll get into. That's right. I want to start first about, by the way, Chris's book, I put the link in the description for. It's very good. It's pretty much everything you want to learn about Scientology is in it, every fucking thing. So go get it.
True. It's true. It's all in there.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot.
It's on my channel. I mean, there's a lot there.
So let's start with like why Hubbard actually started doing this, because he was originally a pulp fiction, science fiction kind of author. Wasn't very good at it. He was, like you said, he really wasn't very good at anything that he did. Although, admittedly, I will tell you this: reading the stuff that he put into the, to the religion itself, or the background of the religion, if he had actually taken the time to flush that shit out, it would have made a good book. It really would have. Like a good science fiction book. Obviously, there were a lot of problems with it, but like, he should have just stuck with that and done that instead of trying to say it was reality. I don't know.
Did you know about Revolt in the Stars? Do you know about the screenplay that he wrote?
No.
Oh yeah. So in 1967 he comes up with this whole Xenu story, right? And And anybody who's watched South Park or, is checked into Scientology knows about this. It's the whole 76, million years ago, vast galactic genocide and all that. Well, Star Wars comes out in 1977. And Hubbard is thinking about and is planning to open a film studio within Scientology as part of the Scientology communication and training apparatus. He's going to make films to train. Well, there's propaganda films and there's training films.
Okay.
How to actually do Scientology, right? How to be an auditor, how to use that e-meter and all that stuff. I mean, they take this stuff very seriously. They treat it as though they are doing scientific level work. And you and I know that's total horseshit, but just saying, when you're in that mindset, that's what you think. I didn't understand what a scientific mindset actually was, but that didn't stop me when I was a Scientologist from telling myself that I had a scientific mindset, right? So Hubbard had this idea of doing these films, and Hubbard had also done screenplay work in Hollywood back in the day, as well as his Pulp Fiction. So he watches Star Wars take off. And remember, by the way, this really interesting little twist with Star Wars that a lot of people don't comment on very often, which is that it begins a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Well, no, but wait a second. He called the whole background thing the Galactic Confederation. And then there is... I don't know. But that was before Star Wars even came out. I saw a lot of parallels between Star Wars and some of the stuff that Hubbard was coming up with.
Well, of course. I mean, Star Wars is far from groundbreaking story writing, and it's mostly based on old Japanese cinema anyway. And Westerns and serial classics and all that. But I'm not trying to trash Star Wars at all, but let's just call it what it is. But here was where I was going with that, is that Star Wars happens in the past. It's not a movie about the future. And the reason that's significant is because in Scientology, they believe in past lives. They believe that we have been around forever, for an infinite amount of time into the past. And that we've been in this universe for trillions and trillions and trillions of years, not 8 billion or whatever the number is now. It's way more than that. This universe.
Well, you started with a smaller number, and then it kept kind of growing and growing for how far back everything goes.
That's right. Yeah. And so this is the Scientology view of the universe. And so because they believe so much in the whole past life thing, and that you have lived over and over and over, you've lived trillions and trillions of lives. And during the course of all these lives, you've lived on other planets, because life wasn't always just been here on Earth. And so there has been this galactic confederation, and there were these invader forces, he calls them, and running around in the universe doing all this invading and implanting and controlling populations, and anything you can imagine basically has happened.
Yeah.
And so when Star Wars comes out, all the Scientologists were electrified too, in the same way that they were by the Matrix, because between the messages of Star Wars and the Matrix, you basically have the message of Scientology.
Yeah, pretty much.
So anyway, I'm going on at a tear here, but that's, they were very excited about this. And so where I was going with all that is that Hubbard wrote a screenplay in response to the release of Star Wars that he hoped to sell and get made into a movie, which was the Xenu story, fleshed out into a whole screenplay. So that's why I thought of that when you brought it. So
I love that he even called the Galactic Confederation the Confederacy too, and not like realizing, that confederacies always lose. But yeah. Anyway, so it starts off with this letter way back when he talks about the whole Excalibur thing, right? That's kind of like the first time he's ever really talked about Dianetics, which is the first book that kind of led into Scientology to become a religion. So he has. Do you remember much about what's in this Excalibur letter at all?
I remember that he certainly thought that he had hit on, something that was going to sell out more than the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that like he misunderstands the whole symbolism of Excalibur, because he has this idea that, because of this new technique and his idea that in his book is going to be bigger than the Bible, he will literally be able to do whatever the fuck he wants.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has this, yeah. So does he actually think that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he really does. Hubbard had a very mixed, odd background in terms of faith or belief or occult ideas. And he definitely did have a very narcissistic twist on all of it too. So his ideas were a unique set of a mixture of things between Aleister Crowley, Madame Blavatsky, spiritualism, et cetera, mixed in with Hubbard's own ideas. So yeah.
So it starts with this letter, and then he takes a while to write the book. And the book is not great. It is not the big, bestseller he thinks it's going to be. It does not change the world. So how does he deal with this?
Well, the war came along. Then he went to war. This was 1938 is I believe the time you're referring to with Excalibur, right?
No, it was 63, I think.
63. Oh, we're talking about after Scientology is already a going concern.
Is it? Because I could have the year wrong. I have no idea. I just know that it started with. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries there. Hubbard started with the epiphany of believing that he had somehow witnessed sacred, secret knowledge that people were not normally given access to. Mm-hmm. This is how he explained it later. That he was presented with a smorgasbord of wisdom and knowledge in this vision, this near-death experience that he claims he had in a dentist chair. This is one version of the story that he tells, is that he almost died in a dentist chair. And in 1938, arguably, it was easier to die in a dentist chair than it is now. Yeah. And he actually, I believe, from this time is when he started hating on dentists because his teeth got really bad in his later years. And he wouldn't.
That's because you had mentioned that he lied about his teeth, but then you didn't say anything about what the lie was. So
yeah, that they were all messed up. Yeah. So anyway, he has this epiphany and realizes that he has got this insight into man. And Hubbard's basic attitude was that he wanted power and control over people. Because he thought he knew best. And he knew he had a lot of issues, a lot of personal issues, the personal demons, whatever you want to call them. And he thought eventually, by the time after the war, certainly, maybe before the war, I'm not exactly precisely sure when it happened, but certainly by the mid-1940s, he's deep into studying the occult. And this is Aleister Crowley. And his Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, and this stuff, magic with a K at the end, and he learns about this whole system of magic and how it's about exerting your influence, about exerting your will, about how magic is manifesting your intention in the physical universe, in the real world, making what, your thoughts a reality is the ultimate sort of goal. And he's thinking that these systems can do this for him at the same time as he's conning people who are teaching it to him. So Hubbard was a bit of a mixed bag of stuff.
Yeah, wasn't it like he's staying with that one guy, John, can't remember his name, and then I don't know, there was a whole lot of drama around this time with what he was doing with the people that were supposed to be the friends in his life and the people that were helping him. He was just fucking everybody over like it was nothing. He was not I don't understand. Okay. the whole thing where, I mean, I know that once you get deep into Scientology, or if you're raised in Scientology, you're not supposed to like look at stuff on the internet and whatever, but you would think that people coming into it first, like, you know, after their first personality test or whatever, however they start it, would be like, yeah, let me look this guy up and see that Hubbard was a fucking psychopath and an asshole. So like,
sure,
maybe he'll follow his religion.
Yeah, but you can do that now. But
yeah, I know, but there are still people that join now.
Oh, sure, some, but very, very, very few compared to the heyday. I mean,
I thought there were millions and millions of Scientologists. That's what Miscavige says.
No, there have never been millions of Scientologists. At its peak, the Church of Scientology's active membership could not have been more than 750,000 people. And I believe it was significantly less than that.
Yeah.
And what we have now is credible, educated estimates, because the church is completely not transparent. The Church of Scientology keeps internal number record keeping like you would not believe. They know to the single digit how many Scientologists are active on a week-to-week basis. But that information is very siloed. It's very, very need-to-know basis kind of information within the world of Scientology. And it's easier for them to just talk about millions and millions of members, but they're just making those numbers up. Our guess right now is about 30 to 35,000 in Scientologists internationally, worldwide, including staff and Sea Org.
Wow. That, I mean, that just feels like they make it seem like it's so much more. They really do. They have a good way of doing that, especially with the way they glom onto their celebrities, their big celebrities that they love so much. But
they get the celebrities to tell the lies, right? I mean, it literally wasn't until about 2 years ago when the media finally stopped repeating millions of members. It took that long, that much exposure of this, that many times of us continuing to say to people in the media, it's not millions of members. They're lying. They've always been lying.
Yeah.
You know, and they finally are getting the message now.
Finally.
Yeah.
But I mean, they still, you know, I feel like they still kind of put off that, the way that they use their celebrities and stuff, they still kind of put off that feeling that they are taking the world over, because that's kind of what they want. They have this, Scientologists really do believe that what they're doing is saving the world.
Yes.
It's so ingrained in them that everybody else is wrong, and this, you know, justify this, the means, or the ends justify the means for them, that no matter what happens, they can do whatever they have to do, because this is the way that they save themselves and that they save humanity.
That's right.
So we have Dianetics comes out, it fails, and then he all of a sudden has this idea about how he's going to make a fuck ton of money. Which is what you call the biggest lie in Scientology. Am I right?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Okay, well, first off, Dianetics actually was a huge success and then a failure.
Okay.
And it was because of Hubbard that it became a failure. And, you know, almost anybody could have managed their way through that and navigated Dianetics into a self-help group all on its own that could have been wildly successful across the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But Hubbard it could not manage his way out of a wet paper bag.
No.
And he just went around and took the money everywhere he went. He would just go and raid the coffers, right? And so he bankrupted his own organization twice because he got a bailout in 1951, right? He writes this book in 1950. It's a legit bestseller, takes America by storm. Everybody's loving it. He goes on a lecture tour. He goes out on another lecture tour. Then he sets up shop and is delivering classes. He gets these classes going in Los Angeles, on the East Coast as well, out in Jersey, in Kansas, he gets something going. So he's got stuff going on all over the place. There's international reach for this. And then he bankrupts it, gets bailed out, bankrupts it again, loses the right to the copyrights. And that's when he starts Scientology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's just like,
no, it's a crazy story. It's
Oh
not
my
anything you should apologize for. It's I live this stuff. I know all these details because it's
yeah.
you know, it's such a crazy story, but it's also a little bit hard to tell because there's so many moving parts to it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm reading through everything and I'm remembering all these different like stupid incidences that he went through and things that he tried to pull. And, it's hard to keep an actual timeline of what he did, to be honest with you, because he just did a lot of crazy shit for a
That's right.
long time.
Exactly right. Because he was winging it the entire time. Let's make no mistake. Let's like really, really be clear about that.
Oh my God, so much.
One, there's no science to the science. Okay.
No.
Dianetics is not the modern science of mental health, and Scientology is not the science of certainty. And
No.
both claims within, that Hubbard made. Hubbard was a shit author. He was really bad at fiction. I mean, if you try to read his fiction, you'll see exactly what I mean.
He's just bad at writing. Like, you read his letters, and he tries so hard to sound smart, and it makes him sound like a fucking moron. Like, it really does.
And that's the thing, is it's all a matter of viewpoint, right? Because and this is the crazy thing about this stuff and why I study it so much now. Is, for 27 years, I thought this guy was a genius. And I thought that Scientology, that I was lucky to have, found my way into a body that was born into Scientology, or that was basically born into it, right? I counted my blessings that was my life. And and I could not have been more wrong, because obviously I didn't know the truth. And the truth is that Scientology is a money-making scam. And I always tell myself I need to lead with that, and I always forget. But it's a fraud, it really, really is. And Hubbard was a conflicted man of multiple levels of character and integrity and personality. He's not a simple Simon guy, so I don't talk about him that way. He was a con man. He was a pathological liar. He was a megalomaniac, but he was a lot of other things too, not necessarily good. He was a serial philanderer. He was married to 2 women at the same time for a year.
He threw his wife under the bus, like, real fucking bad.
He had 3 wives, and all of them regretted, ever meeting the guy. It was bad. So
one of my favorite parts in the book is when you kind of go through and explain why Scientology is not the science of reason, and why, there is no actual critical thinking involved.
Yeah.
And I have a few Carl Sagan quotes when you talk about why, even though it's presented this way as being, the end all of everything and an explanation of everything, it really is not.
No. Not at all. There are tons of potholes and huge chasms of ignorance, of no answers at all in a science, or in this body of information that consists of thousands of lectures, tens of thousands of pages of written materials between bulletins, policy letters, books. Just a lot of knowledge. And in all of that, Hubbard says, all the answers to life exist. You got it all. It's all there. The carefully, as he put it, the carefully taped path out of ignorance and darkness and into shining spiritual ability and personal immortality, right? And along the way, you would expect to get answers to questions like, well, what is the nature of life itself? How is it that an ant is alive and I'm alive? And what's the difference between us in terms of, our awareness and aliveness? If I'm a spiritual entity, what does that make all the other live creatures on this planet?
Yeah.
No answer. There is no answer to that question in Scientology.
You just have to say the Thetans or whatever only invaded the humans, maybe. You could talk your way into it.
Well, see, that would make sense, except for the fact that Hubbard says theta, upon which the word Thetan comes from, right? A Thetan is you, is me, is a spiritual entity. If we're Thetans, but theta itself is a life force, then how does that work with, I mean, is there a one Thetan for every beehive? Or for every individual bee, or not at all? It's just some other thing. Like I'm only throwing this out as a silly example of the kind of rather basic question about life that isn't answered anywhere in Scientology. I looked for decades in vain for an answer to that question, couldn't find one. And there are many, 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 many more. I'm throwing that out there as one I think is fairly easy to understand, you know?
Well, I mean, I noticed like when you were writing about your experience in Scientology, even though, as you said, you were practically born into it, this is what you were indoctrinated into it, this is what you believed wholeheartedly, you still had questions. You still would get to some points and be like, nah, dude, this doesn't make any sense. And then you also had a few times where you like really broke the rules in Sea Org because you had enough. Like it was a very interesting journey.
Yeah.
But I really like that fact because you talk about critical thinking a lot on your channel. This show, in fact, you know, my channel itself, the tagline is Think Critically. You know, it's so important to be able to take that step and see what you're involved in. And there just isn't any actual critical thinking in what Hubbard is putting forth. And I just really love that part of the book that you go through that. So he has his epiphany that what is going to make him the most money and the most fame, pretty much. And this is something that he's actually said for years. In fact, in 1954, he had spoken to his roommate about it and been like, you know, what would be a really good idea? Let's start a cult.
Yeah, exactly. It's a funny thing. There's this quote attributed to him with multiple sources, and the church denies it, of course. But it's, you know, it's this idea that if you want to make money, you start a religion. And it's, you know, it's not like that's a false idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting that he apparently had it and then started a religion.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously you would suspect, well, wait a second, are you doing this just to make money? Well, that's one of the reasons he did it. There is zero question about it.
Yeah.
You know, is that the only reason he did it? I don't think so, but I do believe it was a primary driving force was about, you know, making the money. But it's interesting how
clearly seemed to believe some of what he was pushing.
Well, that's
because even up until the day he died, he would sit alone in his room with his e-meters, and he really thought that, like, I don't know if it, and you mentioned that it might just be because at the end of his life he was just gone, you know, but he did use them by himself for years and years, so he did kind of believe what he was pushing. There also was, you know, the fact that he wanted to be someone that people admired and loved and worshipped. Like, he really wanted to be told that he was fucking right. Because what he went through with some of his writings, especially when he tried to present kind of a you know, save all to psychology, and it failed completely. And he was told by pretty much all the biggest psychologists that this doesn't work, it doesn't make sense, it's not science, it's not psychology, and that fucking hurt him. And that's what I really believe, that's why he went after psychology for the rest of his fucking life.
I agree. He was incredibly vindictive.
Yeah.
He bragged about it in his lectures. I mean, how do I know this? Because Hubbard said he was vindictive. He described himself that way. It's just that when he described it, he would relate it as though it was funny that anybody would dare to criticize his work.
Yeah.
That's how he would talk about it. And he would obviously be talking in lectures to people who adored him. So he could get away with that. And he would brag about how even back when he was a writer of Pulp Fiction, and he'd be at some writer meeting or some party where writers were, and some literary agent was there and giving him a hard time, how he would basically eviscerate the guy verbally in front of everybody and make him look like an idiot so that Hubbard would never be insulted again, right? This person would never dare say another word against him. So that was Hubbard's character.
By the way, speaking of psychology, tonight I wore my alma mater shirt because somebody is back in school studying psychology. So I just wanted to give that to you. I think it's super cool, Chris. And you seem to have so much passion. I've watched you talk about it on your streams and stuff like that. We've spoken about it. We talked about it before you actually decided to do it.
Yeah.
Just really proud of you, and it's super cool. So just wanted to mention that real quick.
Thank you very much.
Good job, Chris. I love it. I love it. Okay, so he decides to make this a religion because he knows what it'll bring to him. How does he first start the foundation of said religion?
Well, it was pretty easy. I mean, the United States is incredibly lax, and especially back in 1953, the end of 1953, beginning of 54, is when they did this. And they incorporated 3 organizations as the base starting organizations or corporations for Scientology, and or what eventually became, Church of Scientology International. And within a year and a half or so, they had IRS tax-exempt religious recognition. And I think it was within a couple of years they had court recognition as well. And once you get recognized in the courtroom as a religion, which is facilitated by getting recognized by the IRS as a tax-exempt organization, then you're away. And it's so easy to do that. John Oliver did it one time on a lark and know about it, right? Yeah, so and he was exposing how easy it is to do and how incredibly far too easy. So Hubbard sets this thing up and picks up the pieces of his bankrupted Dianetics and goes out to Phoenix, Arizona, and starts this Church of Scientology and gets it going. And that's how it began.
I have a question from the chat. He asks, would you say that Hubbard and Miscavige are very similar in character?
Yes, I would. Miscavige definitely learned well at the knee of Hubbard, so to speak. He worked for him directly while Miscavige was still a teenager. When he joined the Sea Org, I think at like 15 or 16 years old. And he himself was a second-gen Scientologist, Miscavige. He was born in 1960, raised in a Scientology household by his father. When he got involved, when Miscavige was still young, I think like 10 or 11, I think is when they first got involved. And he joined the Sea Org and went straight up almost immediately, very unusual, up to where Hubbard was at and was working directly for him and carrying out Hubbard's orders on a daily basis. And he did that for years until Hubbard had to go into hiding. Miscavige was then basically the communications relay point between Hubbard in hiding and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that position is an incredibly powerful position if you want to use it that way. And Miscavige did. And that's how he ended up taking over.
See, I see a lot of similarities, but I feel like, and we'll talk about Miscavige at some point too. Sure. But I see Miscavige as just so much more cold and calculating and a little less crazy than Hubbard. Hubbard was just really kind of fucking nuts. And I mean, Miscavige has the whole malignant narcissist thing, but he's not like nuts like Hubbard was. He knows what the fuck he's doing and he does it well. It scares the shit out of me, okay?
It's a different kind of set of calculations for sure. But let's remember, Miscavige, at least at one point, was without question a true believer in Scientology. He was all in on the belief set and still could be. It's a bit debatable as to how much he actually still believes of it or not. I have reason to question some things on it, but we don't have to get into that. As a manager, he definitely follows in Hubbard's footsteps of, the way you control people is you compartmentalize information, you control the milieu, the environment, and you make sure that they are so afraid of you that whatever internal voice they have telling them to not do what you say or not do what you want done is overridden by the fear factor. And that's a Hubbardism. And Miscavige learned that and has perfected that under his own reign of terror.
Plus, there's that kind of feeling that they tell you, well, if you're not getting this, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah,
you know?
That's right.
So, like, if you don't understand something, and there's a lot to not understand, and we'll go through some of the OT levels and stuff like that. It's not clear. Again, Hubbard wasn't a great writer. He wasn't a scientist. He was just a dude that thought he was saving the world or something. But reading through it, there's so much that doesn't make sense, and there's a lot of holes in it, I think, that are purposeful because they want to. You can't, there isn't any explanation, so they leave it without one. But they make sure that when you get to that point, when you feel like you want to ask questions, you are told, well, if you don't get it, that's on you. And that keeps them there. The same, it kind of goes congruent with the whole fear factor. Fear and stupidity holds you cemented into this position.
Yeah, and belief.
Yeah. Which, it's really interesting to me that there just doesn't seem to be a lot of religion in Scientology, in the Scientology religion. Like, even you admit that the whole, because you don't even learn about fucking Xenu, whatever you want to call him, until you get to a certain OT level. It is kept secret from you. You literally have to pass all this shit, get to OT3, and then you're put in a room locked by yourself, secured, to read the original writings in his handwriting of OT3, which is I'm sorry. It's so much, but they make sure also this whole idea that, you have to keep working and throwing money at this in order to reach these levels. This is the only way that you're going to become clear, even though it's technically impossible to become clear right now because the OT levels are not finished, which I don't understand.
Well, it's not exactly how it works, but fair enough. I mean, the contradictions are kind of that stupid, Hubbard died before he completed his work. And he was going.
But also, do you really think he wanted to, though?
Oh yeah, no, I do. I absolutely. Okay. Oh yeah, no, I think he wanted to. He was desperate to get out of hiding and come back. He wanted his name cleared. He wanted to be back amongst his friends. I mean, he was off in hiding with 2 people.
Yeah.
Up in San Luis Obispo, so he could not be around anybody he wanted to be around. Right? The thing about cults and cult leaders is it's a codependent relationship.
Yeah.
So the leader is, the spiritual vampire, and the followers are giving of themselves over to that. And we've all seen over the last year that when you impose a physical distance, it really makes a difference as to how much energy you're getting from other people and your relationships with them, And Hubbard was off in hiding for years before he died, a failure. So I'm only saying that because the reason why it's so loosey-goosey, frayed spaghetti of ideas all over the place is because that's Hubbard's head, and it was a mishmash of plagiarized ideas and goofball imaginative stuff, and it was just Scientology. It's whack.
It's whack.
Basically.
So I have this question: why was Hubbard so angry at the Catholic Church? Did it have anything to do with the fact that they are the biggest nonprofit, make the most nonprofit organizations in the world? What was his fucking deal with the Catholic Church? Seriously.
Well, I don't know that he had a thing with the Catholics specifically, because he bagged on all religion to a degree except Buddhism.
Maybe it's because I was raised Catholic and I just reading through it. All of a sudden there are these things that pop up that are dude, I know I'm not technically Catholic anymore, but it's kind of fucking hurts. I
get it. Yeah. Here's Hubbard's one of his key ways that he would twist, mess with your thinking, is that you claim to be the opposite of what you are. by blaming, and you can double up on this by making what is perceived to be a good guy out there to be a bad guy.
Mm.
But with the Catholics specifically, let's say, you have the added bonus that much of Hubbard's criticism of Catholicism was actually in his lectures through the 1950s, when Catholics were not very trusted in the United States. You know, Kennedy got in despite being a Catholic, not because of it.
No.
So there was a lot of distrust of Catholics. So Hubbard would also use that to springboard into getting people to have faith or trust in him.
Yeah.
So if I badmouth the Catholics and call them a control operation whose only goal is to take all your money and time and effort and energy out of you for their twisted ends, and all they're doing is controlling you, if I point that finger of accusation at the Catholics, and Hubbard did exactly that, then you're looking at the Catholics and you're not looking at what Hubbard's doing.
Yeah.
And what Hubbard is describing the Catholics are doing is exactly what he's doing.
Okay. Yeah.
And Hubbard would do that over and over again. He did it with science. He did it with evolution, for example, with physics, you know, with basically everything except engineering, which seemed to be the only science he had any respect for. And he did it with other religions. He said religion on this planet is a control operation carried out by, you know, those invader forces, those space guys. And because, and here's the twist, because we too have lived all these past lives, we have also engaged in these control operations. So we're both the sinner and the sinned upon, right? And he said, this is why we're all so fucked up, is because we've been both so many times, we can't get our heads straight as to who we are.
Wow. Okay.
You know, this is all just fantasy, but it's a way of explaining why humanity's so fucked up. It doesn't happen to be true, but it's a reason. It's reasonable enough if you buy into the premises of being a Thetan, living in the past, you know, living past lives. It's easy to buy into the rest of it, is where I'm trying to say.
I can't remember the name of what they call, or the implants. Is that what it is?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So he believed, because and we'll get to that how the implants and the thetans and thetas work all together. How the implants have the ability to change what is actually there and whatnot. So he believes that we are both of them. Then is that because of the implants, you know, suggestion on us, we become both that part and the thetan as well. Okay.
Well, okay. It's more like this. Maybe you were describing it this way, but let me clarify. You are a happy little ghost or soul or spirit or thetan.
Yeah.
Bouncing along from life to life to life, right? So you're in one body, you grow the body dies. You go and you grab another body as a baby, you grow it, you live that life, the body dies, you go get another. You have been doing this trillions and trillions of times. Between these lives, when you're floating around, free-spirited, so to speak, they grab you. That's when they get you. And they stick you in a room as a spirit, as a ghost. They can grab you with electronics and they stick you in a room and they spin you around and they
don't forget the chariots. Don't forget the chariots and the cherubs or whatever the fuck.
Right. They show you pictures of 3D holograms of chariots and cherubs and crosses and angels and devils and demons or whatever else they want to show you to screw with your head, get you thinking ideas that they want you thinking, and get you to stop thinking about things they don't want you thinking about. And if you can imagine that this has been done to you also millions of different times.
Yeah.
Over all these trillions of years that you've lived, you've had lives where you were a saint and you've had lives where you were a sinner. The main thread or story of your life was a life of good or a life of bad. And you've had equal measures of both. And here you are. You can't remember any of this crap because you're told to forget it between lives.
Yeah.
And you're being implanted millions of times with millions of contradictory, crazy different commands and memories. And here you are as a human being on planet Earth. And this is Hubbard's explanation for why things here are so insane.
Yes.
There you go.
That's good, because that gets us to another part I wanted to talk about was kind of some of the where we came from imagery. Because what I really took out of that was how he described the physical realm coming into reality and how it was the Thetans. Because there's the physical realm and then the conscious realm, which is the Thetans, and I can't remember what he called the physical realm. But
yeah, well, you mean not the physical universe? Okay,
you go ahead and explain it. The whole way that the Thetans work with you fucking do it.
No, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page as you. I mean, of course, like I'm trying to correct you or something. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what you're asking.
Trust me, you know way more about this than I do.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, here's what I can say about this. Again, this is one of those territories where Hubbard wrote about a paragraph. There's not a lot here to dig into in terms of where we all came from. Thetans basically come from some other place that Hubbard refers to as home universe or native universe, right? Your own universe. And, at one point, the physical universe didn't exist. At some point in your life as a spiritual entity, a long ass time ago. In fact, Hubbard dates it to 4 quadrillion years ago.
He loves his big fucking numbers. He really does.
He loves the big numbers. And of course, we know he would, because the longer ago it was, the more of his zany, imaginative crap can have happened at some point inside there. You know, are you telling me that in 4 quadrillion years, there could never have been magic? Right? Or in 4 quadrillion years, Star Wars couldn't have happened? Is that what you're saying? Right? Like, after a while, you just go, okay, it's just ridiculous. That's why I just started saying after a while, when I was first explaining this to people, I started just saying, you know what? It's pretty much nearly infinite. That's how long we've been, right? Because it's easier than saying 4 quadrillion.
Well, that's what you were telling people in your lectures and stuff. You're like,
try to explain this to people. So, okay, so we come into this universe for reasons unknown. All I know from what Hubbard has written and lectured on that I could dig up and find, and I've gone through a lot of stuff, but I can't say I've gone through everything.
Yeah.
But I did spend 27 years in this stuff, and I spent a lot of that time trying to understand Scientology. And in the 8 years I've been out since, I've read a lot of material I couldn't read when I was in the church. And so this is where my knowledge comes from. So, so he says that we entered into this universe with a crash and a bang and a lightning strike and a ripping sound or something, and cherubs and a chariot and angels and demons. And somehow this symbology was right there.
Yeah, but this was before there was actually a physical universe. So
we crack over into this place, whatever you want to refer to this place as.
Yeah.
This isn't the Big Bang, okay? This is even before that or whatever. And if you wanted to, I suppose, see, here's how Scientologists could actually still believe that this is true is, one of the posits, one of the explanations for Big Bang is that it's a repeating cycle.
Yeah.
Right? It explodes, it implodes, it explodes, it implodes. Well, good. So 4 quadrillion years ago, it had imploded and exploded 8 times. Or whatever. You could say, you could just, this is just territory of the imagination.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this is basically the origin story for Scientology. People talk about the Xenu thing as some kind of origin or genesis story, but it really isn't. What I'm explaining now is as close as a creation story as Hubbard ever gets.
Yes, because Xenu is all about how humans came to be, but not the existence of everything.
That's right.
So, and as you said, and as you mentioned in the book, people make a big deal about it, especially because of the South Park episode, but it really isn't, center point, the true center point that people believe it is in Scientology itself.
Correct. That's right. And let's go ahead and get this out in the open, since a lot of people don't know this. Only about 5% of Scientologists have ever heard of Xenu.
Yep.
Ever. I mean, I was in for 27 years. Not once did I hear that word when I was in Scientology. It's confidential. You don't learn about it until you get to OT3. And I didn't get to OT3.
Yeah.
And they take that seriously. They take that shit real seriously. So the security is inside the bubble world. Xenu is one of the most closely guarded secrets. But at the end of the day, the story itself is only one part of why it's so closely guarded.
Which is why.
Right? The main reason it's so closely guarded is because you learn about body thetans. And body thetans are thetans just like you or me, fully realized individual spiritual identities or individuals. Mm-hmm. But where we experience the whole Xenu thing and somehow we're able to keep our sanity and awareness enough to keep living a life and get bodies and have lives, these guys didn't. These guys lost their shit. They passed out. They went unconscious. They fainted, you could say, as spirits.
Yeah.
And they stayed that way. And they clustered. And it's really weird because thetans aren't supposed to have physical reality, but Hubbard refers to them in physical terms. So he talks about how they clustered and how this incredible destructive genocide that Xenu carried out 76 million years ago.
Because he was the head of the Galactic Confederation.
Yes, he was.
That was taking over all the planets around this sector at that time.
Correct. That's right. There were 13 planets that made up the Markab Confederacy or the Galactic Confederation. As I understand it, these are interchangeable terms. And Earth was part of that grouping, and there was this big overpopulation problem. And so Xenu, the head of this whole group, decides, well, let's just get rid of everybody. So he collects everybody.
Thanos, yo, like seriously.
Why not? So let's gather everybody up. Let's bring them to Earth, which was called Tegiak at the time.
Yeah.
And let's blow them all up and let's implant them over the course of, I think, a 3-week period of time. Mm-hmm. Billions and billions and billions of spiritual entities, thetans.
Nope, 34 days. It was 34 days.
34 days altogether. There you go. Yeah. Trapped on Earth. They can't get out. And they are implanted and left here, basically. Mm-hmm. And so the body thetans are the ones who couldn't recover from that experience. And instead, what Hubbard describes is they kind of glom onto each other and then they glom onto you. And you, unbeknownst to you, for all these millions of years, and this is actually the big secret reveal, you have been carrying these spiritual leeches with you, unbeknownst to you, for millions of years. And every now and again, and by the way, you have thousands of these things on you, not just 2 or 3.
Wow.
So sometimes, from time to time, they'll wake up. Will the one hero wake up? Will the one hero wake up? And they'll look around and they'll have a thought. Or something will happen to you and it will trigger something in them. Because remember, these are fully realized individual beings. They are not manifestations of you. They are themselves.
Yeah.
They're stuck to you. And they can't wake up. They can't get free. As bad as you are with all the bullshit you've been through over all these millions and trillions of years, you guys have given up. They are just about as dead could be for a spirit because thetans can't die.
Yeah.
Hubbard said you can't kill them. They are unkillable. So they can go to sleep, though, and they can be knocked out. So
Okay.
that's the big shocking reveal of OT3 is, what? I've got these things all over me, and these things, when they wake up, they have thoughts. Guess who hears those thoughts? You do, in your head, and you think it's you thinking, but it's them.
Yeah.
And they mess with you, and they screw with you, and they screw with your thoughts, and they screw with your planning, and sometimes they will even make you do horrible, awful things that you would never do, and here you are doing them.
Like rip off your best friend and, you know, take some money away. And
Exactly.
So more of an explanation again for Hubbard to say why the world is as fucked up as it is. It seems to be.
Exactly. This was actually, and here's the thing, within the Church of Scientology, this information is revealed to you at OT level 3. Now, OT level 3 is mythic within the world of Scientology for its importance, but no one knows what's on it until you get there. I just told you what's on it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that when I was in the church. No one who's done it can reveal a thing. You sign documents that appear to have quite strong legal teeth that every single time you reveal anything about it, it's going to be a $10,000 fine. Now, nobody's ever had to pay that fine. It's completely ludicrous. What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I just said, Jesus Christ, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, okay. So, so this is a big, so you're told in Scientology that OT3, when we get everybody onto and through this level, this OT3, these steps, that is the thing that is keeping peace on earth from happening. Like, if we could get everybody through OT3, we would solve peace on earth. We would solve war. We would solve criminality. There wouldn't be any more insanity. There wouldn't be any more criminals. There wouldn't be any more war. This level would solve that.
Which gives the people within the church this incentive to keep throwing more money and more money at the church in order to reach this level, which you said only 5% of the church's members even fucking know.
Exactly.
So,
that's right. And the people who get to it get this big reveal, right? They're entrusted with this knowledge. They are told this is sacred knowledge, that people who are exposed to this information before they're ready for it could die, will actually develop pneumonia and die within 3 days. They say that's part of the implant. Hubbard wrote that, right? It's part of the implant, is that you can't undo it.
Yeah.
But somehow Hubbard in his genius figured it out. And so the OTs, the people who get to these OT levels and finish them, are convinced not only that this has happened to them and that they have to do these procedures to deal with it, but they now feel that they have the hidden secret of life itself that everyone else through all of human history has been looking desperately for, but has never been able to find. And that if they could get this solution, that they could truly be peace on earth, that we would solve all of the problems, because it's the reason we have all the problems. So the reason I'm stressing this and talking this way is because I want people to get that this is what Scientologists at the upper levels of Scientology truly believe. So you can look at them and go, what a bunch of kooks, what a bunch of nutcases. But I'm here to tell you, these are well-intentioned people who honestly believe that their money and their time go into a practice that is the only thing that's going to save the world. And that's pretty nuts.
Yeah. Well, actually, speaking of nuts, you made this offhanded comment in your book where you said Xenu isn't the craziest thing that Hubbard came up with.
Right.
So what to you is the craziest thing of all of this that he came up with?
Oh my God. You know, the thing that I could never get my head around that he said was he went on a tear in 1952 in a book called History of Man, or A History of Man. He wrote about how evolution was a true fact and how we had experienced living in different, earlier, more primitive life forms. Talks about the mollusk and the clam and the sloth and this, and this whole series of incidents that he writes about as though it's there to be found, and you audit this stuff and you make people better. And he talks about how toothaches are the result of when you were a clam on a beach way back in the day, and a tooth and a sore tooth might be because a little bit of sand got in the clamshell. And it just went to town, destroying the inside of the clamshell. And when you re-stimulate that, when you're reminded of that now in the present, you get a toothache and you develop a cavity and stuff. These are Hubbard's. I know it's nuts. It is, but I'm just telling you, this is the stuff he writes about. Now that's kooky enough, but then, and this is the part that I think is totally cray-cray. He writes all of that, tells people to audit it, right? Address this in the counseling. This is important stuff. You're going to save people's lives doing this. You're going to change their whole appearance. Then 15 years later, he writes, actually, no, all of evolution, the entire evolutionary process, yeah, that's an implant too. Didn't happen. It was all a setup. And that's it. That's all you get. He doesn't go into more exposition. There's no more story. It's just not an implant.
He does that a lot, though. Like he'll start some thought, and then that's just fucking it. Like you get nothing else from it.
I know. It's just it's crazy making, and I wish I had the time to do a project. And if it was about 100 lectures or even 200 lectures, I might actually do it. But 5,000's a few too many for me.
A little bit.
All the lectures, or as many as have been released, as many as I could get my hands on, and see how, try to put together a coherent picture of the cosmology of Scientology, because it's hit and miss. It's a sentence here, it's a paragraph there, it's a bit of a book, it's a little bit of a lecture. All these things I've been talking to you about took me years to piece together.
So you understand why I don't exactly get the timeline right.
Oh, no. Like I said, I don't blame you in the slightest. I have a hard time keeping it straight,
So I'm thinking if we cut this into two, we'll stick with just Hubbard and the creation, which we've done most of. There's one more thing I want to talk about with Hubbard. Yeah. And then next we can talk about the actual OT levels as well as Miscavige. I would like to
love to talk about that stuff. And as you're finding, this is a topic that this is the gift that won't stop giving. Scientology is a bottomless pit of fascinating crazy.
It is, but the way we met actually was on God the Scummer's channel, talk about Narconon. I could talk about fucking Narconon forever. Like that, there's so much to it. But I guess the last thing I want to talk about with Hubbard is the thing with the FBI, because that was just fucking crazy.
Yeah, Hubbard's on-again love-hate relationship, on-again, off-again with the FBI was fascinating. Hubbard basically came out of the military post-World War II, and he was not in a really good way. Now, remember, though, that following World War II is the beginning of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And McCarthyism is rooting up in 1950s when Hubbard has written Dianetics and is starting Scientology and all of that. The backdrop of this in America is the Red Scare, Cold War, and McCarthyism. And also, of course, the atomic bomb scare, too, which is in the mid to late 50s. And Hubbard, basically, you can understand Scientology, the early days of Scientology, a lot better if you understand that Hubbard was trying to gain acceptance anywhere he could get it, in and out of government organizations, law enforcement, as well as with the public. Mm-hmm. Because Hubbard had what he thought of as enemies. Hubbard was vindictive, and he was a bit paranoid. And I am not using these words lightly. I'm actually using them in a fairly clinical sense here. Hubbard was paranoid. Yeah. And he developed very, very complicated conspiracy theories over the years because of this vindictiveness and this paranoia. And so the reason this is an answer to your question about the FBI is because all through the early 1950s, Hubbard tried to leverage the Red Scare, the commie scare, and the FBI to use them to take out his enemies.
Yeah.
Right? He literally wrote to the FBI about his ex-wife, about people who badmouth Dianetics, badmouth Scientology. He would call them commies. He would write to the FBI and say, you should investigate this person. I have reason to suspect that they're a commie agent.
Yep.
Flat out. This was Hubbard's modus operandi. And until he eventually came to the headspace, get this, that the FBI was in on it. That the CIA was in on it. That all these guys were working in collusion against him.
Can I say something here? This, as I'm reading through all of this crazy fucking shit that he's going through, the paranoia, the, using the FBI, then bringing it back upon them. I see so many fucking parallels between Hubbard and Trump.
Yes. And I was just about to say, actually, I was about to tie these two things together because the QAnon deep state conspiracy is basically old hat in Scientology.
Yeah.
There's a very similar concept. It's not called the deep state in Scientology, but this concept of a shadow government, of a world behind the world you see, that there is a veil behind which the wizard operates. This is
a lot of the wizard.
What Hubbard believes.
Yeah.
And talked about in detail in some of his lectures. He talked about 12 men who rule the world. And he talked about this before the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy existed. I mean, Hubbard was like the original conspiracy theorist on some of this stuff.
He really was.
Yeah, he was really down the rabbit hole on this stuff. And the way his mind worked is that he's writing to the FBI, he's writing to the police, he's writing to these organizations about his enemies. They're not taking action. And we now know through FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, that they recognized he was nuts. I mean, they said he's, probably a mental case in one of the writings in Hubbard's.
Well, I felt it was a bit of, the boy that cried wolf too, because it was like every fucking one that was clearly against what he was doing is like, totally a commie. So
exactly. But once they would not take action, the way Hubbard's mind worked is he set up his own in-house spy organization. And it was called the Guardian's Office. And his third wife, Mary Sue, ran it. And he put complete and utter faith and trust in her. And for decades, she delivered. She was running a whole little network of private investigators and lawyers and Scientologists who were doing dirty deeds. And that is what led to them getting that busted, the raid in 1977 that we talked about earlier, that we referred to earlier. It was direct result of Hubbard setting up his own covert intelligence organization within the Church of Scientology.
The audacity, though, for him to try to pull off what he tried to pull off with the FBI just blows my fucking mind, though. To think that he actually thought that he could pull this off. But then, getting caught and throwing his wife under the bus and she ends up in jail. Another wife that he's, fucked over. It's just like, why did anybody marry this guy? And he, like you mentioned, he was a serial philanderer too. So he was getting a lot of ass, like for some reason.
He was a serial philanderer. I mean, the guy and then it all folds up in the 60s. It's like somehow his dick shrivels or something because he just nothing.
Pictures of the guy. Come on.
Well,
eventually, his charisma was not going to work anymore. So
right, exactly.
I have a question from Anjur. She asked, "Does Chris think that the movie that wasn't about L. Ron Hubbard but really was? What do you think about it?"
Yeah, I think that's The Master. I think you're referring to the movie The Master.
Is that the one with Philip Seymour Hoffman?
Yes.
Oh, that is so fucking good.
Yes. Yeah. I actually did a full video movie review of The Master.
Okay.
And I really recommend everybody watch it because I talk about all the parallels. And I actually did a scene-by-scene breakdown of pulling from the film and showing how it is 1000% Scientology. That movie is the best rendition of what Scientology actually is that has ever been made by a non-Scientologist.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, definitely. I will find the link and make sure to put it in the description. Yeah, I love that movie, and Miss Philip Seymour Hoffman very much. But anyway, so I think we got most of the basis of the religion, as well as is there anything else you have to say about Hubbard? Other than he's
right now, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sorry, you don't mind breaking this into 2 parts. You were always on the, I'm pretty sure you've been on my channel. You're tied with Godless Engineer for being on my channel the most. So like, it's fine. Okay. Cool.
I'm happy to talk about this stuff. I want people to know about it. And I want people, my best case scenario for talking about this stuff is that people realize that it's not just Scientology.
No.
You know, like if you're looking at this through the lens of tee hee hee, oh my God, those crazy people over there. Well, fine, you can do that. It's called rubbernecking. You know? But there's actually lessons to be learned here in this about you and me and everybody else. Because, you know, you're not stupid, I'm not stupid, but I believed in the principles of a you know, very malignant narcissist for decades, because I thought what he said made sense. And I was raised to believe that what he said made sense. So it's not the quality of the ideas that's going to determine whether somebody's going to be a cult follower or not. It's emotional commitment. It is, you know, lack of critical thinking. It's a lack of recognition of critical thinking skills being important. You know, this is the stuff I want to get across to people. So I'm just going to say that stuff out loud because I think it's important. Yeah,
and it very well parallels a lot of other cults, including the MAGA crowd. There's, you know, I think we could do a whole other show just connecting, you know, between Scientology and that.
Yeah.
But yes, this is the book, Scientology A to Xenu, even though it's Zemu, so it's always going to bother me now.
The secret of that story will remain in the text, and if you are truly curious about it, check it out. It's in there.
It is. No, but seriously, it is so well written, and there's so much information. And again, I love the connection that you have at the beginning, because you talk about your experience in the church, but then you go on directly to just, this is fact, this is what happened, and it's really well done. So hey, go get the book and read it before we do the next one, so you know what we're fucking talking about. So
exactly. Well, thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you. Do you have anything big coming up you want to share at all?
Not anything super big. My usual content, which is always awesome, of course. So, you know, you should check out Sensibly Speaking podcast and my channel. I have a call-in show on Friday, podcast on Saturday, and Q&A show on Sunday. And I do those every week as I am going through my master's program. And that's where a lot of my time is going right now. So, and will be through the rest of this year. But it's cool. I keep the channel up and I keep going. And I've interviewed some wonderful people, and intend to continue doing so.
Awesome. And his links are in the description. Thank you so much, as always, for coming. You're a good friend of mine, and I always love having you on my channel. And to everyone in the chat, thanks for coming this evening. Just remember, think critically. Night.